A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. So for this very occasion, here on another beautiful Monday morning, what I got here to offer is another movie that I have talked about before, and well, it does, believe it or not, turn 15 years old this year. Yeah, in 2009, there came along a movie known as Planet 51. This is basically what you might have guessed. It's an alien invasion type of film that circumnavigates on the horrors of an alien coming down to a certain planet filled with life and all sorts of things. It's a point where simple times eventually grow complicated. However, though, there is a bit of a twist here. Instead of aliens invading Earth, it's an Earthling invading an alien planet. Yeah, that's right. The astronaut in particular, known as Charles Baker, lands on this planet after gathering data supposedly made from a drone. A lunar rover type of thing, just simply called Rover. However, since the rover didn't exactly report back to him, he had no choice but to make his landing on his own. In terms of the planet that this film takes place on, it's quite similar in a way in appearance to Saturn, but it does have the terrestrial feels of Earth for the most part. Some hints of Mars can also be spotted, including some rocky terrain and a not so clean atmosphere. But in any case, this is technically a planet that's filled with life that's certain to be one of a kind. Because after all, the 1950s was a big time for pop culture in relation to the likes of space and alien disasters. And well, this planet in particular, all the life that it has, including a young student known by the name of Lem, who apparently struggles in life to try to get the best that he can out of a professional school. He basically showcases his beliefs in certain life and also his centerings on the universe and other pieces of astrology, but while most people out there aren't too fond of his educational skills and his unique gifts, they're pretty much more centered around a film that centers on extinction. Yeah, basically, there's a film trilogy out there, and this film series is quite similar in a way to what most alien movies were about. The fact that even the government is unable to stop them puts a number of the viewers, including one young boy, not necessarily at ease. However, things do eventually carry on though, as, like I've said, Baker lands on the planet, eventually horrifying everybody into thinking he's an alien invader, possibly out for revenge or conquest. And the fact is, even the government officials out there whom are out to investigate the landing and also figure out where Baker is located at, they have no idea what to do. They're pretty much under the pretentious beliefs, just because of a number of comics and movies depicting aliens as horrifying creatures bent on genocide, that this person in particular is pretty much no different. I mean, just think about it. This was how times were back in the day. Crazy, complicated, and you had pretty much no sense of belief whatever kind of thing would take place. Nowadays, if anyone out there wanted to take a hold of a certain topic and keep it, then that's up to them. But we're certainly not going to live like how we did 70 years ago, when everybody was just thinking that the world was going to end because one person touches the ground from up above. I mean, when you think about it, there's 100 million things that practically touch down on Earth from space. And a majority of them might be meteorites, which thankfully are a bit of a blessing for those who might not be so lucky, because you'll have the opportunity to sell them to a museum for a good profit. Back then, though, it just was not the same as what we got today. Life's an easy thing to live with. Lots of great stuff has happened, and we've had some amazing turnarounds in history since then. Anyways though, as the plot itself carries on, Baker is eventually discovered by Lem while they're both at the museum. Lem tries to call for security and the government, but Baker reveals his true intentions to him. He tells Lem that he has to return back to his ship, and in order to do so, they got to get past the government, as well as the numerous blockades and setups that have taken place all around it. Eventually finding out that they do intend on dissecting the alien. This was all made possible from a scientist whom apparently was not so keen on believing that the alien was of any good either. So, with Lem pretty much being the only support that Baker has, it's technically like a one-man mission, but with two people, thankfully. And the stakes aren't entirely raised, but it still is a bit of an obstacle for them to get across. Eventually, though, things do eventually get a little more complicated, because Lem's love interest, Nira, eventually joins in as well. And then you also have a somewhat delusional old man known by the name of Skiff. Then, of course, the young boy, he not only mentions for Baker's autograph on his Humaniacs poster, as well as his chest. I mean, as weird as that might sound, I wouldn't mind autographing somebody down there. But in any case, though, this is basically a team that just grows by the numbers. But still, they have to be as careful as they possibly can. Because when they gather intel from other locals in the township and eventually find out that Rover is still around, well, it thankfully does become much better for them as they eventually try to make their way back to the ship. But then, soon enough, what goes on? Some capturings take place. Rover is kidnapped, manages to escape, thankfully, and then, of course, reunites with the rest. This eventually does boil down to an epic showdown. But this wasn't done by the usual fighting or tactics that are usually conveyed by most action films. No, instead this is basically a large dance party that takes place. The fact that Chuck is even there, it really is quite a way to showcase a number of things that could have gone wrong. But hey, using his spacesuit as a disguise to get into the club, a contest by all means. Eventually it breaks out, and then the unthinkable happens. Rover is kidnapped again, but to add insult to injury, now Charles is kidnapped too. So, of course, what does this call for? Well, Lem's got to go save him and Rover from a possible annihilation. They find a secret base, quite akin to that of the real-life Area 51, which, as we know, was the famous facility in which the remnants of Roswell, New Mexico have since been contained. And we all know what happened 72 years after that incident, right? An attempted raid took place. Simple times do not need to be complicated again, my friends. But you know what, though? As the movie eventually comes to a close, the general tries to solve things on his own. Not only by pulling out his gun and threatening everybody, but also by trying to use a remote detonator system, which apparently is a set of rigged explosives that are powerful enough to destroy the entire base. Yeah, so talk about eventually coming to raise the stakes even higher. You know, not only does Chuck have to deal with the grieving scientist who also wants to study him by dissecting his brain, but he also has to deal with a somewhat inferior general, whose only mission, of course, is to just shoot a bullet and blow up a base. Yeah, that's pretty much all he intends to do, as all other motives pretty much fail. With his comrades being electrocuted and whatnot, of course the general has to take things into his own hands, like any other antagonist would. But eventually, though, the escape does take place. However, the general is saved, sort of like with other antagonist characters. They're not left there to die, unless they feel like it. No. It seems that half of the films nowadays tend to allow antagonist characters to die, while some others are left to live, be it by going to prison or otherwise. But in this case, the general simply just lays there until eventually regaining consciousness. He is also, believe it or not, under the belief that he is now a zombie working for Charles. I mean, as if that hypnosis trick from the Humaniacs film series was ever a real thing. But that's just how it was like back in the day. Nowadays, all of us know that it's a huge piece of fakery. Anytime an action or horror movie or otherwise is made, we already know that it's fake. We have never once tried to make a belief that something from it is real. I mean, if you remember Joker 2019, how everybody believed that it would cause a number of problems in life, that's literally why they had police officers come into every movie theater upon its release. Especially the state troopers, as I recall. So, talk about it being a serious topic. Anyways though, Planet 51 comes to an end. Chuck eventually escapes from his ship successfully and decides to allow Rover to stay on the planet alongside the rest of the people. Just so they can gain a further understanding, and also so Skiff can have some good company, the closest he might have to a dog. Though we of course know what the real alien dogs were like on that planet. Yeah, kind of similar to the xenomorph from Alien 3. The way that it's quadrupedal and all that. And even urinates acid. Not like bleeding acid like the actual xenomorphs were capable of doing, but still, it's a good reference in both ways. But, with that closes off a unique film with a bit of a twist in all directions. And I'd say that with a pretty good cast out there with the likes of Justin Long and Dwayne Johnson, I would say that this is a pretty notable film that I certainly have watched over and over again over the years. And after 15 years, well, it still hasn't really changed. I will say though, there probably are a few things that would have been worth tweaking around a bit just so eventually it could be seen as a potential masterpiece. But to a lot of us, it still does live on in the hearts of those who love good concepts. And this was one of those examples of a prime concept that was made by twisting everything around to make something entirely new. And I'd say, with it being a unique piece, I'd certainly gratify this with a score of 7.9 out of 10.1. So, after 15 years, I still feel indifferent about it, knowing that it was a good film then, and sure does remain a good film worth watching nowadays. And well, I guess that closes off this piece. But I'll see you guys again with more content. This Friday, I will have another film worth reviewing again. And make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.
I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.